come home and the little kids are still, why don't you put these kids to bed? We had to go to bed at 6 o'clock. Put these kids to bed.
We had to put Dale to bed. He always was ready to go to bed. We was up at the crack of dawn and he was ready to go to bed when it was time.
Kay was kind of that way too. She was
Oh no, don't tell me that.
She was easy to go to bed. Well, are we going to have an introduction or something? Do I look okay?
You look great.
For posterity.
Are you put on your formal for it? Put on your lace?
I don't have anything with lace, but I could have dressed up, couldn't I?
Do you have a
Oh, you look
crochet
pretty nice.
hook?
I thought you did dress up.
Well, I was going to my music lesson. That's
Do you
why.
have a crochet hook handy? Is it right in there?
Yeah, in that little basket. I moved everything into that little basket. Okay, we'll talk about in the order.
That they arrived.
Yeah, they arrived.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay, and you want me to do the introduction?
Yeah.
What shall we say? Sam has asked me to. Sam has asked me to remember some of the things which have occurred in this family over the years. And so, as he said, we'll take them in order of their arrival. When
That was the most humorous when they arrived.
I can't remember the years, the date, but when we were living in Buckeye, we had a two-door Ford, and whenever we'd go anywhere, we'd make a bed in the back seat, so we had four, Toy and Sue and Kay and Nick, and Linda was the baby. So I'd hold Linda and we'd put those four kids back there in that seat. And when Walt worked at the drugstore in Buckeye, he frequently went to Mesa to get advertising, advertising cards, the placards, and some of them were figures, life-size figures, so it would take quite a lot of space to put them in the car. And so we'd put the children in when we were ready to go. We'd stay at Mammy's while he went to his doing whatever he had to do to get that advertising, and we'd put the children in the car. They're not asleep yet, but hoping that within a mile they'd all be asleep. And then we could cover them up with a blanket, and then we'd put advertising over the top.
Oh, the top of them, huh?
Yeah, these were this was cardboard. And one time, we did that several times, and anyway, this one time, we got going on the road and got about up to Alma School Road, and we hear crying going on back there. And Sue says, "Toy's crying." She's yelling over the advertising and stuff. And he said, and Walt said, "What's the matter back there? What's the crying all about?" And so Sue consults with Toy to see why she's crying. And she finally calls back, "Toy doesn't want the lid on." So we had to stop and laugh about that and try to fix the lid. When Sue was born, Toy always called her Mimi. We don't know whether she was saying, the child's name was Phoebe Sue. We don't know if she was saying Phoebe or baby or what, but it came out Mimi, whatever it was she was saying. So she would, whenever the baby would cry, she'd come running to me and say, "Mimi, yeah, yeah, yeah." That was her introduction. And we had a stroller for Nick when he was little. And we lived at 327 on Southern Avenue. And Kay just loved to take him out in that stroller and let people see him. She'd take him down to the school where there was cement, where she could push it around, and then on the way back, on the way down there, people always stopped to look at the baby. And she'd say, every time, she'd say, oh, so-and-so stopped me, and had to pick him up and hold him. And she said, Mama, it's the dimples that get him. Try to remember here all this stuff. And when the children had chicken pox, we were at 327 then too, and they were all in that back bedroom, and the girls were really sick. Toy and Sue and Kay were really sick, but Nick wasn't sick at all, and so he was the go-get whenever they needed anything. And one day Mammy and Aunt Sue came to visit and brought him some little presents. And we had the room all dark because the doctor said it would be hard on their eyes because it was a real light bedroom. So we hung blankets at the windows so the room would be dark. So Mammy and Aunt Sue came back there. Well, said, Nick, everybody else is sick. Now, how are you? And he said, I'm tired. I work all the time. These girls just want Kleenexes and Kleenexes and drink water and Kleenexes. So,
This is Macho Nick here.
yeah. He was the one who was working hard. And about Linda. Linda was such a boob when she was a baby. She would just cling to her dad whenever he was home. He had her. He'd hang her on his hip or whatever he was doing. He had that kid. And one day, he and Sam were someplace, and Uncle Sam, and when they came in the house, Sam came in first, and Linda, thinking it was Walt, ran to him, or she was too little to run, so anyway, she wanted to go to him, and Sam took her, and she was happy, thinking she was with her dad. And then, in a few minutes, her dad walked in, and you never saw such a confused child. She looked at her dad, and then she looked at Uncle Sam, and looked at her dad again, and everybody was kind of holding their breath, waiting to see who she's going to decide was who. And she picked the right one. She finally recognized her dad. It was her dad that she didn't have. So, and I'm not sure about years. I wish I could remember years, but at one time my brother Alfred loaned us a horse. He was big, and we had those Shetlands, but the kids had outgrown the Shetlands, and the big kids wanted a big horse. And so Alfred loaned us this big, long-legged Riz-Raz was his name, and we had him out in the pen with the Shetlands, and Jan would go out there and climb up on the rafters in the shed and get on that horse. She was not too big yet for the Shetlands, but she would ride those horses, ride him around in the pen, just like, and no bridle or no halter or anything. She would just sit on that big old horse and ride him around the pen.
Get on from the rafters, huh?
Yeah, she had to climb up on the rafters to get on him. And Sue finally took him home, and she had to ride him from Southern Avenue in Phoenix to Southern Avenue in Mesa. You're just straight down Southern Avenue, because that's where my brother lived, in Mesa, though.
Mm-hmm.
And she rode him home, and it took a long time, 16 miles at least. So, and another thing about Jan, she used to love to listen to the news on radio. And when she was little, Russia invaded Finland at one time. I think the only time, because they got whooped. And one night she didn't want to go to bed because she was afraid Russia was coming to invade us. And we had to show her a map, and she didn't understand maps, but she was real concerned about Russia attacking us. Now, when Doc first went to school, our church, we didn't have a building yet for our church, and we were meeting in the basement, in the cafeteria at Roosevelt School for our church meetings, and Relief Society was held in the neighborhood house. And after his school was over, he'd come over on Relief Society Day, on Tuesdays he'd come over and meet me at the neighborhood house. And one day, Georgia Bowser was standing in the doorway when he came over. Georgia was a real big woman, and he kept trying to figure out a way to get around because she was standing right in the door, and finally he just held his breath and squeezed through, and he got the funniest look on his face as he was coming over toward me. Man, it just looked so odd, and he came over, he said, "She's soggy." He went, Doc also went later years, when he was in Mr. Lott's class, I think, Lott Burke's class, they went to Tovry's meat packer, Cudahy's now, but it was Tovry then. And for years, I don't know, I think he got over it eventually, but for years he couldn't eat meat. He couldn't eat any kind of meat. And he had to smell everything. He still has to smell everything before he can eat it, but he couldn't eat meat. Okay, we got a Doc. No, Cindy. Cindy just loved to loved to be rocked. When she was little, she just loved to sit on people's laps and be rocked. And one day she was sitting on my lap, and she looked up, put her hands on my face, and she said, "Mommy, you've got wrinkles." I said, "Yeah, that's right, I'm getting old." And she said, "Don't you wish you were new?" I think of that, so I think that's the sweetest thing. Don't you wish you were new? And when Scott was 8 months old, or the day after Scott was 8 months old, I was out washing in Phoenix. I had my wash house was outside in back of the garage, and I was washing and I kept hearing him. I knew he was in the yard someplace, but I was busy, and I'd go and look and see why he was yelling. He was yelling, not crying, but yelling. And then he'd shut up, and I couldn't find him. So finally, I went, because he kept it up, I made a determined look to find him, and he was on the roof.
How old was
His
he?
diaper was caught on a nail, and he was hanging there on the roof. And he had got up by climbing up a ladder that Walt always left against the house because it had 2 rungs missing, so if it was high, you really couldn't reach him, and he'd pull the box over. Walt used the ladder to service the cooler that was on the house, so he needed to get up there every day. And so that was my introduction to the rest of Scott's life. That really introduces Scott's life with us. Can you hold this for a minute? I need to tell Tim something.
Yeah.
Okay. A really used expression in our family it has always been, "For
Hi,
Pete's
this
sake."
is Tim Openshaw.
And
I understand that my wife
one
is
day
having
when
car troubles. I was wondering if there's any way I
Sam
could
was
talk to her.
involved in something, he came out with "For pink snakes." I think that's a real innovation, for pink snakes. I didn't think of anything else. I'll probably think of 100 things after we get through with this.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell me the story about Dad. Some funny story about Dad.
Gee, I should have been thinking about that. How about when they found the dead woman?
Yeah, that sounds good.
That's not really funny. He and Tom sailed, and they were about 15, I guess, or something. They were just kids. Went rabbit hunting out to Superstition Mountain, and they saw when they got to where they were going to hunt, they saw another car, quite a distance from them, and they went on. This was early in the morning, and they went on to their rabbit hunting, and when they came back in the afternoon, it was sort of late in the afternoon, that car was still there, and they hadn't seen a soul where they had been, and they could tell the car hadn't been moved, so they drove over to see the car, and when they were within the close area, they could see that there was a hose from the
Yeah.
exhaust into the car, into the cab, and they slowed down a little, not knowing what they were going to come to, and anyway, they went over to, they knew because they could smell the hard smell before they got there, so they knew that the person in it was dead,
Mm-hmm.
and had been for some time. It was August, and they ran. In those days, cars had running boards. And stood up on the running board and saw a horrible sight inside. A woman who had been dead for more than a month in August, I think.
More than a month?
More than a month. And of course, some of the flesh had fallen off. It was a terrible sight. And they hurried back to town. They hurried back to Mesa and went to the constable, who was Mr. Pickens, and told him. Well, he got in his car and took them and grilled them all the way. You know, why did you kill her? What, you know, he was solving the crime before we saw there was a crime yet. But when they arrived there, he realized that he had no jurisdiction there. So they had to go to Florence because they were in Pinal County. They were out of Maricopa County and in Pinal. And so they had to go to Florence and get a deputy and come out. And those boys had to go with that other deputy again. So it was a good long while before he got out of there. But there was a note in the car which told why she took her life, and that whoever found her could have the car. And Walt and Tom were real interested in that part, you know. And nobody ever honored that at all. Nobody ever thought about giving the car to those boys. But they took the car and stripped it inside, but they never ever got the smell out of it.
Mm.
Never ever. And they changed the paint, and Walt recognized it always. He always knew that car. And he'd say, "That's the car." They sold it a number of times and painted it a number of times and tore out the upholstery and tried over again, but it was a Buick, and it was a new car when it happened. And so that was a little thing that we just by surprise sometimes. Sometimes it would be in a car lot. There's the car. Yeah, that was one neat thing.
And that's when he was 15 years old?
About that. And when he came back here, he always had that. He always subscribed, well, I mean, not say always, but for years he had subscribed to that United Real Estate Catalog. And so he talked about moving to Idaho, southern Idaho. He loved that idea.
After he came out here?
No, this is long before that. And finally he found more stuff that he wanted in northern Utah than in Idaho. And so first it was Oregon, and then we got down to Idaho, and then into northern Utah. Well, we had that little 7-acre apple farm in Utah. We said, oh, that's not big enough. We need something bigger. And he'd bring home this catalog and show me all these pictures, and we'd read about what was on that, that farm, And then one day, so we taught, we're moving to Oregon, we're moving to Idaho, we're moving to Utah. So one day he and Morris Curtis came home and he said, well, Morris and I are going to Missouri and buy a farm. So now we moved to Missouri, That I took it just as seriously as I had all that other stuff. And then he came and did it. He came and found the farm and bought it. And they brought home some turtles. He brought us out here to see it in July. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. Who did he buy it from?
He bought it from Martin Kime. Martin Kime? That might not be his first name, but Kime anyway. And the place before Kime was Hammer, and Mr. Hammer had owned all of this land. This was all one place at one time. All what the Fries had, what the Lemons had, and what the Browns had, all that belonged to Mr. Hammer.
Mm.
And then I discovered this summer when those two men came to see the place where they were born that they had owned it before, and their name's Lawfrey. Lawfrey, Logfry, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they remembered when they left when the oldest was 4 years old. And I said all he could remember about Missouri was it was so beautiful. And I agree with him.
What did Dad name the farm?
Billy Acres. There's one on the way to Mountain Grove. There's a farm called Back Acres. So I said, we'll name ours Billy Acres. But we spelled it B-E-L-L-E, but we pronounced it Bell. Bell Acres, beautiful.